All right, I'll try to keep this one a little bit tighter than the last couple lectures. I know those went a little bit long, or parts of this. So, note the opening. Earl Ober was between jobs as a salesman. What a great guy! Carver has the best opening lines. What that does is it puts this story, even though it's third person point of view, firmly in the mindset of Earl Ober. Because what does that mean to be between jobs? It means you're out of work. It means you're unemployed. Earl doesn't see himself as that. He sees himself as temporarily between jobs. So he has this sort of vision of himself. Note too that instinct that he sees himself as a salesman, all the things it goes towards that don't really help out the situation of him not having a job. As the story progresses, he becomes more and more concerned with helping his wife, Doreen, achieve this goal that wasn't even her goal of losing weight. So she'd gone to work nights as a waitress at a 24-hour shop. One night, when he was drinking, it worked up the nerve when he was drinking to go see if he could get something for free on the house. She sees him at the bar there at the restaurant, say it's like Mel's or something like that. What are you doing here? She handed over the order to the cook. What are you doing? What are you gonna order, Earl? Kids okay? Gives us hints of a backstory. Find out they have kids. They're fine. And number 2 sandwich. And he asks basically, can I get some free food? She says no. Don't talk to me now. I'm busy. Doreen is constantly at work in this story. Earl is not. Earl drank his coffee, waited for the sandwich. 2 men in business suits. Again, we get these. Now, this shows us, in Earl's mind, especially too, these men represent a higher class than him in his mind. They represent what he wishes, what he strives to be, where he wishes he was, and he's not. So their opinions are very, very important to him. What they say is very, very important to him. It's very ironic, this story. The title itself, They're Not Your Husband, it comes from whenever she's lost too much weight and the people at work are worried about her. And he's like, you shouldn't care what they think. They're not your husband. When in fact, the whole story, the germ of the story, the catalyst for the story comes from 2 men making comments, ugly comments about Doreen that Earl shouldn't care about because they're not her husband either. But there's a difference because these men represent something better for Earl. And he feels like if he could change this, then he too will be better. So again, we get a character sort of failed. Now again, I will say this, and this comes up more and more as the Carver stories go on, especially maybe in the next one we're reading for tomorrow, one of the next ones we're reading for tomorrow. I feel like, now, especially in some of the other stories too, you can go through this book, and that's the great thing about these stories. I mean, you can spend 10 minutes on them and get this feeling. I feel like, even though Earl is very, portrayed as villainous here, I feel like for the most part, Carver really humanizes these types of urges that people without have sometimes to fill those voids and to solve problems with stuff. In this case, it's not necessarily with stuff, but in a sense it is, because what he's doing is he's turning his wife almost into a commodity. So there's a lot of sexual politics going on here as well that you could really dig into. I mean, he's in a way he's trying to sell his wife and her looks. But this story aside, even maybe with this story, I feel like Carver never looks down on these people for doing it. He's just saying that happens. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit that that does happen, that we all sort of face, or, and if it doesn't, then bless you, because you've been able to sort of rise above that. But I think we all have our things that comfort us in bad times. And I've done my best not to talk about everything that's going on in the world, because these stories should speak for themselves. But this, I think, is a good example of that. I don't usually find myself up at 2:30 in the morning and thinking that, oh man, you know what I need is this thing on Amazon, is this DVD collection. I feel better if I, like, but the time sort of called for that. And I don't know why I should be shocked. I mean, it takes us back to the second page we read this semester, where you had Henry Dobbins carrying pound cake. You had Kiowa carrying a hatchet. You had, was it Rat Kiley? Norman Bowker carrying a diary. You had Rat Kiley carrying comic books. These things help comfort them. And I don't think it's that much of a leap to think that sometimes spending or making bad decisions can be a form of comfort too, to people who are struggling. Tim O'Brien, I think it's easier to see the humanity in it because these guys are at war, and we're able to sympathize a little bit more. Monroe did it too. What was the first thing that the narrator in Moons of Jupiter did after she found out her daughter maybe has leukemia? She went and shopped for a dress, right? We cut her that slack though. Carver, the characters he's dealing with, especially now, and it's just sort of the way class distinctions become over the year, often don't get cut the level of slack that we've cut the characters for other stories, if that makes sense. I mean, I often get irritated. I often get irritated on Facebook, is an understatement, on social media. But there's one meme that really, really bothers me, and it could be even apocryphal. It may not even be a real thing, but like, it's the meme that is it's like the shaming meme that shows like a grocery list, like a receipt from somebody with a welfare card or EBT card, and shaming this person for certain purchases. And I don't know, man. I think it's a human instinct to sort of comfort yourself with these. That doesn't mean it's right. We should do better. I should be like all singing Imagine or whatever, like Gal Gadot did, which is funny because Imagine was written by a guy named John Lennon, and the whole idea is about being possession free and living as one. And John Lennon himself he told his biographer he's somebody who loves to buy clothes. Couldn't get enough clothes. So there's like a version of Imagine, not the one that was released, but like sort of a demo, where the line is, "Imagine no possessions. I wonder if I can." And he was confronting himself. So we all do it. I just think it's easier to pick on the poor, and that kind of sucks because I just don't think people are doing these things on purpose. I think it sort of goes in that. I've sort of gone off on a tangent here, and I'm sorry. Nevertheless, Earl Ober is totally an asshole because he hears these guys talking about his wife. Instead of standing up for his wife, or instead of just ignoring it and not letting it bother him, he's disgusted by it. Not by them, but by her. And there's this image we see where she bends over. Carver doesn't always use words like this, but when he does, he uses them well. Veins that spread in a berserk display. I love that word, that use of the word berserk there. So he sees this. Now what this is doing is setting up for dramatic purposes later on when he asks her to pick up the ice cream. We know the same thing's going to happen. And what he wants is for somebody to ogle his wife. He's like one step away from being a pimp in this story. And not like the cool kind with the big hat and car and everything. But so he gets home, checks on the children, pulls the covers up over his eyes, allowed himself to think. He opened his eyes, rolled his head back and forth on the pillow, then he turned on. So again, opening eyes, closed eyes. In the morning, after she had sent the kid off to school, Doreen came in the bedroom. Right? So Doreen works all night, gets home, and does more work. Wakes up, or gets the kids ready for school. Then she goes and wakes up Earl. And what does he say? "Thank you for letting me sleep in." No, he says, "Look in the mirror. You should diet. You need to give a diet some thought. Just a few pounds." You've never said anything before. This lets us know that the businessmen were sort of a catalyst for this. It may be something he hadn't even thought about before. So there is sort of a social element going on there. Never thought it was a problem before. He tried to pick his words. He's doing a bad fucking job of that. Nightgown still gathered away. She turned her back. She lets her butt cheek drop. Maybe I'm all wrong. I guess I could lose, but it'd be hard. You're right. It won't be easy, but I'll help. It's a task. It's a job, but it's not anything concrete that's going to help them out of their situation. It's, he's creating more work for himself, unnecessary work for himself, all based on these things these businessmen said. So they talk about diets. There's some good stuff in here with protein diets, vegetable diets, grapefruit juice diets. They didn't have the money for certain types of diets, which is a really nice commentary even now on, all kinds of problems with healthcare. But one of the biggest problems is preventative, and not people being not able to get the types of food they need to be healthy. Okay, forget it. He said, no, you're right. I'll do something. What about exercise? I'm getting all the exercise I need and that. And he comes up with this great diet plan that's sure to work, called Just Quit Eating. All right, she says, I'll try. For a few days, I'll try. You've convinced me. I'm a closer. Connects to his job as a salesman. Now he's feeling his worth again. Then this scene just blows my everything. He figures up the balance in their checking account, drove to the discount store, and bought a bathroom scale. He looked the clerk over as she rang up the sale. A lot of things happen here. First of all, the fact that he's going over this balance to make sure they have enough money tells us they don't have enough money for something extra and is unnecessary to this. Nevertheless, he gets her this scale. So the thing he's spending money on is this thing that he feels like is going to help change their predicament. The third thing is the way he's looking at the clerk. You get the sense that he's comparing the clerk to his wife, in a physical way. At home, she gets on the scale. He runs his finger down one of the veins, this weird sort of obsession. All right. Next day he goes to a job interview. The employer, heavyset man who limped, as he showed Earl around the plumbing fixtures in the warehouse, asked if Earl, were free to travel. You bet I'm free. The man nodded. Earl smiled. He had some questions as to Carver's just so sparing with his details. Why include that the guy limped? I think it's Earl showing us that. This is a third person point of view, but it's really close to Earl. And that's something Earl would notice, something he would see as some sort of deficiency. That's what's going to come to mind, not how the employer was dressed, or if the employer was nice to him, or the job sounded good. He says he's heavy and he has a limp. These are sort of these physical things. That's how Earl is defining worth. He gets in and he walks in. Doreen's eating scrambled eggs and bacon, and she feels guilty. Her cheeks are puffed. Then she spit everything into a napkin. Feels guilty. I couldn't help myself, and he's just horrible to her. Slob. Go ahead, eat. Goes to the bedroom. She opened the door. I'm gonna try again. Okay. 2 mornings later, she called him, and she'd lost 3/4 of a pound. It's a start. Then we get to this, again, transformation in Earl. It's a false transformation, but it's something he thinks changed. He read the classified. He went to the state unemployment office. Every 3 or 4 days, he drove somewhere with an interview. At night, he counted his tips, smoothed the dollar bills out, stacked the nickels, dime. Each morning, he put her on a scale. In 2 weeks, she lost 3.5 pounds. I picked, she said. I starved myself all day, and I pick at work. It adds up. But a week later, she'd lost 5. A week after that, 9.5 pounds. Her clothes were loose on her. She had to cut into the rent money to buy a new uniform. Again, there are people who are trying to get by. He's out of work, and because of this thing they're trying to do, and at least in his eyes, it's going to make things better. They have to spend more money on new clothes because she's losing weight, and not losing weight in a healthy way at all. Too fast, and not the way to go about it. People who work are saying things. Don't worry about them. They're not your husband. Of course, there's that irony there. So because those men weren't her husband either early on. Early morning, followed her into the bathroom, waited. He got down on his knees, pencil paper. Look how like a fish, like he looks like he's hard at work here. He's got all these dates, numbers. My wife teases me. She's sometimes when I am not doing the work I need to be doing in the fall, oftentimes. Maybe not this fall, but in the fall, She's like, what are you working? Are you working on a script there? Or are you working on the script you're supposed to be working? You get that outline done? She said, I write. I have a writing partner, deadlines. And you go grading papers? She's like, I'm like, no. She's like, what are you doing in that journal? I see your numbers. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out my fantasy football lineup for next week. So that's what he's doing. He's not figuring out his fantasy football lineup. He's actually being horrible. But at the same time, this is where his energy's going. Doreen spent more time in bed now. She's not healthy. Earl helped her around the house, watch TV, let her sleep. He did all the shopping. Once in a while, he went on an interview. Weird transformation here. So like he's doing things he should have been doing anyway, but now he's doing it because he has to, because she's sleeping. Has malnutrition. Anyway, we get the symmetry here. He goes after he had a few drinks, puts the kids to bed, goes to the coffee shop, and he's trying to get the response he wants that will confirm himself, right? And it's at the cost of making his wife into a piece of meat, basically. And he pretends like he doesn't know her. So he's talking to the waitress, trying to get some confirmation there, like, oh, she looks different. And the waitress is like, I gotta do my job. He ate the cheeseburger, drank the coffee, he just keeps waiting. People keep sitting down, leaving. Earl watches his wife and listen carefully. He wants somebody to say something. Doreen finally is like, what do you want? Why don't you leave? Finally, there's this man next to Earl reading a newspaper. Keeps waiting for the guy to say something. Doreen came by, removed the dirty plate, poured the man more coffee. She leaves. Earl, this is so gross, leans over to the guy. He's like, hey, what do you think of that? And like nods at Doreen. Don't you think that's something special? Man looked up. He looked at Doreen, then Earl, then back to his newspaper. I hate when people talk to me in restaurants. It's one thing I'm looking forward to about going to restaurants now. It's like, it seems like people will bother us less. What do you think? I'm asking. Does it look good? Tell me. The man rattled the newspaper. Then Earl's like not getting what he wants. He's like, I'm going to have her bend over the way she did for the gentleman. So he does, and the whole thing comes back. But at this point, the other waitress sees Earl trying to sort of point the guy his wife's direction. And you get this great moment where, who is this guy? And Earl has to try to put on a smile. He's caught. Doreen has to say, he's my husband. He's a salesman. He's my husband. Doreen said at last, shrugging. Note how this is not a happy ending to this story, but the tables have been reversed early on in the story. He walked away from her while she was trying to talk, and here he really is the one, who isn't able to put these things. It's this embarrassment, it's this shame, and he really deserves it. I mean, again, this is a little, just for the motif, the fact that it is one of his more popular stories, the motifs, the themes, but just in terms of how it ends, it's really unlike a lot of Carver stories. It feels a little bit like a Flannery O'Connor story, in that her stories usually ended with some sort of catharsis that came through some sense of embarrassment or violence. Now, there's not violence here. If this was a Flannery O'Connor story, Earl would get hit in the face with a 2x4, and maybe y'all would be happier with the story than you are here. But anyway, it's, this is the Carver catharsis, the Carver epiphany. It's something as simple as embarrassment, nothing flashy, nothing sensationalistic. It's just sort of an emotionally true moment of recognition, even if that recognition tells the character very little and it's harsh. And that's what we get with "They're Not Your Husband." Okay, I'll post this for sure, just to let you know. For tomorrow, I'm gonna try to get done tomorrow. I've had a few things come up. We'll be reading "What Is It?" And then from the next book, we'll be reading "Why Don't You Dance?" And the reason I've split it up is because I like for you to see sort of the transition into those sort of aftermath stories. "What Is It?" is as good a transition into the second book, which again, first book, characters on the brink, second book, characters in the aftermath. And I think you'll see just how well those two stories pair up. "What Is It?" and "Why Don't You Dance?" And it's important to note that "Why Don't You Dance?" is the first story in the second collection, much like "Fat" was the first story in the first collection. So you can kind of maybe even see some similarities there, especially at the end. But I hope you enjoyed it. So next week, I may be posting a few lectures early, maybe as early as this weekend for next week. Next week's sort of up in the air for me right now. My grandfather took a fall a few days ago, and he's not going to make it. So I'm going to need to go back to Missouri, which is going to be fun to travel. But things just aren't set up yet. But it's going to be sometime next week. It's going to be there and back. But rather than leave you hanging, I will probably post things ahead of time. That does not mean you have to post in advance as well. It'll just be that stuff set up for you. So that said, you guys have plenty of time on your hands probably. If you get extra time, make some phone calls. There's probably some people out there that would love to hear from you. People that you don't know, they'll be around forever. So that's what I'll leave you with today, and I hope you enjoyed the lectures.